Hey guys, today is another speed art video and I'm going to be walking through my process of creating this piece. This was made for a friend, Dominic's Legion, and I'll link his Instagram and things in the description below. If you want to see more of these, then let me know. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of the video. Alright, so by popular demand, I had quite a few people asking what my process for creating art is. So that's what I wanted to cover today. And I'll be using this drawing that I created for Dominic's Legion, a friend of mine. And this is a Assassin's Creed Valhalla fan art type drawing. And so yeah, I just wanted to kind of dissect to go through what I'm thinking as I'm drawing this image. By no means am I fantastic at this. I'm a student, I'm still trying to learn a lot of it, and in fact, most of my time these days is spent doing 3D and modeling and technical art and different things for games, so I don't actually get to draw that much, so I've been trying to do this as much as I can in my spare time. So the process that I use, that I tend to go through, is I will do something like this where I start with a sketch or a drawing of some sort, and I'm just trying to figure out the composition and the rough idea of what this image is going to look like. And I find I like using sketches, but I don't always use sketches. There are times where I just go straight into blocking in values and shape and all these different things. Sorry, I bumped the mic. Hopefully that wasn't too loud. And so yeah, I use sketches initially, and then I block in the grayscale values. So that's just me trying to separate the background from the foreground and the main character, and just trying to get a balance to the piece where you can clearly see the forms and silhouettes of each element. And I really think silhouette is super important to the clarity of an image, and I try to keep my blockouts fairly clean, although not always successful. And so after I've done my blockout, then I'll go in and I'll try to detail things a little bit more, or kind of get more clarity into the forms. So adding the big blocked out forms within the initial silhouette. So for example, coats and armor and rough face. And then after that, I go to a like the kind of the gradient map stage. After I've sort of finalized those forms a bit more, I do a gradient map in which I just quickly block in some color, and then I'll do final touches where I adjust and add colors on top of that, and I add things like rim lighting or extra little effects. And so yeah, it goes from sketch to blockout to detail to gradient map, and then the final details. And I find this process works really well for me, and I think it's important to not limit yourself to processes though, and to learning new things. So I actually only learnt this style of doing it, I think this year, maybe a little bit of last year. So I used to, and I still do it sometimes, I used to not block forms out, and I used to go, sometimes I'll go straight in with color. Although I've never really preferred that. I don't have the skills yet to be able to apply color straight away, because that's probably my weakest thing and something I want to work on. So yeah, I find it's really helpful to stay zoomed out during the initial stages, and in fact for as much of the piece as possible. I think it's really important to keep the whole image in view, so you'll notice I pretty much never, or I try not to, actually I do it quite a bit, but I try not to zoom in and out constantly. I try to spend most of my time seeing the whole picture and trying to get the big blocked out values and things like that, because you'll find when you zoom in and you try to detail something and you zoom back out, it may not even be following the same lights or the perspective, and it may just look weird, and you kind of have to redo it again anyway. So in the attempt to save time and to be efficient with art, I try to stay zoomed out so that I can get the whole picture and the whole composition in mind the whole time. And the other thing is I try to flip the canvas horizontally as much as possible. So you'll see later on that I kind of will flip it every so often just to check that the composition is working. Because you'll find when you flip it, things become extremely obvious that they're off. For example, the arm that is in front of him that is throwing the axe was way too long, and the leg that is planted on the ground is also too short. And there are many other issues with this piece, but I do find flipping helps a lot. It's kind of like when you see photos of yourself, it's actually from a flipped perspective, because in the mirror you always see your face one way, and then when you get a photo it's often the flipped way, and you feel like something looks weird, or you're just not used to seeing a face that way. And it's a similar thing with flipping a canvas. It's just really obvious when things aren't working or when there are forms that are wrong. And I also think getting feedback from other people is really helpful, in terms of just having fresh eyes looking at it and trying to improve your piece. So I think maximizing the amount of maximizing your ability to critique your own work and to be able to clearly see issues with it is really important. The more you're able to catch issues earlier on, the more time you can save, and also the better of a critical eye you'll develop and the better work you'll have in general. So I think it's important both to enable yourself to see those things easily, for example flipping canvases, keeping your perspective zoomed out the whole time if possible. Those kind of things are going to really help improve and speed up your art. But then of course getting feedback is super useful. So we've gone from sketching to the block out, and I'm just starting to detail and really get into trying to define some of the forms within the image. You'll notice my focus with the values is to really separate the background from the foreground, and I try to keep the highest level of contrast on the character. So I like to have the character have some of the darkest darks and some of the most bright highlights as well. Because in general that's just the way things work. Things that are closer to you, for example on a horizon, trees closest to you are going to have deeper dark values, and they're going to have brighter highlights, and trees in the background are going to have less dynamic range. And that's just with atmosphere and things like that, but it also just helps bring your attention to those things. And so that's what I've done with the painting so far. And so yeah, that's the reason I start with black and white, is because it's gonna make it very obvious where values are blending into each other, and it's hard to separate forms sometimes when you just use color straight away, because red and green may obviously contrast each other, but when you turn it to black and white, they might blend in and look the exact same. So that's why I use black and white initially. I think there are better ways to do it potentially, but this is just what works for me. So the people who do grayscale and do this kind of style of coloring really well, I'll link their work in the description, and you can also probably they actually explain how they do it, and I think they do a much better job of it. But there would be Peter Moorbacher, or Moorbacher, Bacher. It'll be on the screen, and then I'll just link it. I'm terrible with these names. And also Trent Kanuga, or I don't know how to say it, but both great artists, and both use this kind of style and actually do a really, really good job of it. So if you want to learn how to do it, then I would go to them. Otherwise, maybe I can teach you guys, but I'm not going to have anything new to bring to the table necessarily. So I think it works quite effectively for quickly getting color down. But yeah, so you'll see I'm drawing near to the end of all the detailing, Most of the forms and shapes are there that I want. And so very soon I'll be going on to color grading or doing a gradient map. And the best way for me to explain what that is you're essentially telling Photoshop or whatever program you use it in. I don't know if they have the same sort of thing in other drawing programs, but I'm sure they do. You're saying where my darkest values are, make it this color, and then where my lightest values are, make it this color, and blend it in between. So you'll see that's what I do. And what I tend to use is whatever my shadow values are, I'll make that fairly subtle, but still have a little bit of some color in there. And I'll contrast that with opposite, or not necessarily always completely opposite, but a contrasting color for the highlights. So for example, in this piece, you'll see I go with cooler blues, and then on the highlights, I use values that are quite warm. So I use oranges and pinky reds and those sort of colors. So let me just see when I'm about to. And you'll notice at the very end, you'll get the final image, and I do add a few little things such as blood and some little effects and things like that. Those are not super important to this. They were just more for finishing the piece off, and that's part of my final detailing stage. But yeah, when you gradient map, you want to use, you can either set it to a color overlay so that it keeps the values you've placed down, or you can use the gradient map to sort of shift some of the values around and create more contrast. But yeah, that's basically the entirety of my workflow. As I say, it's not perfect, but it works well enough for me, and I enjoy using it, and it kind of makes art kind of a bit more fun for me, rather than, I know I can use gradient maps as a bit of a crutch, and it's something I actually want to develop, is my ability to use color and develop fundamentals. You can see there's quite a few fundamentals that I need to develop within this piece, but I think it's a fun way to do things, and hopefully that helps you guys who were wanting to know how I do the art that I do and what processes I use. This is the process I use. So if you guys would like me to continue doing this, then let me know. I do enjoy it quite a bit, and I'd be happy to explain maybe more in depth some of my processes. So I'm just gonna let the rest of the video finish up, and you can just see me finalizing it and then the final image. So that's pretty much all there is to it. I appreciate you guys being here, and now I will let you finish up and then send you to the outro. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more, then feel free to either hit my face and subscribe. Don't literally hit my face, but just the button. And then there's also a YouTube's recommended. Otherwise, just your support is great, and I appreciate you being here.